What's up? How you feeling? How you living? How you doing? Okay, so today I'm talking a little bit about a book I just read called The Courage to Be Disliked. This book took me quite some time. It is it was written by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga, right? So it's an interesting book. It took me a bit of time. It wasn't like an easy book to read for me. I wasn't particularly enjoying the way in which it was written. It's like a dialogue. Yeah, so the whole book is a dialogue. So that was not easy to read for me. But let's have a chat about it nonetheless. Okay, so there's different parts. There's the first night, the second night, the third night, the fourth night, the fifth night. So the book is basically partitioned into those different nights, so into 5 different partitions, and it's interesting. I learned a little bit about perspectives that one can have, about how to live in a specific kind of intentional way versus a passive kind of like, yeah, haphazard way. So okay, so within the partition of the first night, we've got the part that goes on about denying trauma, why people can change, that trauma doesn't exist, that people fabricate anger, how to live without being controlled by the past, Socrates and Adler, and are you okay just as you are, unhappiness being something that you choose for yourself, people always choosing not to change, and the fact that your life is decided here and now. So there's two like perspectives that are tackled in the book. There is the etiology psychological perspective. So that's pretty much psychology as we know it, right? So that's the common belief that whatever has happened determines what is going to happen. So we basically go around living our lives like a domino effect, right? That's etiology in a nutshell. And then there's teleology. So teleology is a very different psychological perspective. I learned of the phrasing teleology because of this book, but I mean, I've heard the perspective because of, some beautiful minds that I have the good fortune of being able to come across in my daily life. So yes, so the book basically says that it's kind of dispelling this whole atheological way of living and this perspective that one is a victim of circumstance, that one has to bend to the will of like the world, and like how whatever cards you were given are the ones that you have to play basically. And it's dispelling all of that, and it's saying no, teleology is the way of life, and that like living in the now is the way in which one is supposed to live if they want to achieve ultimate happiness and ultimate control of like what they're doing in their life. And I think, I mean, of course, when it comes to control, that's like a touchy subject because of the fact that most of us, there's like so much control that you can actually say is yours. There's so many things that happen that like you have to respond to, that you could not have anticipated, that you did not wish would happen, and yet they do. So if we kind of pretend that we're in control of everything, sometimes that could actually be just something that's untrue. But the book doesn't say that that you are in control entirely, in terms of like, there's something that it speaks about where it speaks about separation of tasks, and that there is a limitation of like what you can deal with, so that just touches on the fact that you aren't in control of everything, but there are things that you are in control of, like how you respond to certain things and the like. So I think this tone that is like developed in the first part is pretty much the tone that like reverberates throughout the entire book. Even when we get into the second night, all problems are interpersonal relationship problems. This speaks about how, as I was touching on earlier, the separation of tasks and how certain things are not yours to deal with, and certain things are. Speaks about why some people dislike themselves, feelings of inferiority, that life is not a competition, admitting fault is not defeat, and this, like, it expels the lifeline. It says don't fall for the lifeline. So it's a very psychologically relevant book in my opinion. And then, okay, we move on to the third night. The third night speaks about how it's important to discard other people's tasks, how you must separate your tasks, how you must cut the Gordian knot, what real freedom looks like, how you hold the cards to interpersonal relationships. The fourth night, this section speaks about where the center of the world is, individual psychology and holism. It speaks about how it's important to understand that you are not the center of the world. It speaks about how it's important to not rebuke or praise, kind of take an impartial viewpoint in terms of like not looking at things from a hierarchical perspective, but looking at it more like from like everybody's on the same level playing field when we're speaking about how people relate and such. So then there's the fifth night. This one goes into how young people walk ahead of adults, the difference between trust and confidence, how you can be happy right now, that life is a series of moments, right? So it's very important to be centralized into the now of things, as opposed to constantly living in the past, which is depression, and constantly yearning for the future, which is anxiety. So some of these things are like things that a person would have already been aware of, but the way in which the perspective was built upon, and like the way in which certain things were highlighted, they shine a new light on certain cliches that we've heard, or certain ways of life that people have already been exposed to, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think the book was not easy to read. I think the book was I think it was well put together. Even though, yes, the format of like dialogue is tough, but what is happening within the dialogue, and how that dialogue is transpiring, and like how the youth is sort of like debating with the professor, or with the philosopher of sorts. So that was quite a read. I probably wouldn't read it again, just because of, I don't know, like for me, I'm not sure if I fully agree with everything. There are nuggets that I kind of pull from it, and I'm like, okay, this makes sense to me. But like there's other parts that I'm like, I'm not sure if I want to completely resign my opinion to this one. So that's the thing. I mean, there is something in the book that says, for someone to actually like fully adopt the psychology switch, or like saying I'm gonna live my life specifically on the teachings of what's going on in this book, according to what was said here, they say it takes a person half the length of their lifespan to actually fully grasp what's being said in the book. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's just something that was said. But nonetheless, I feel I think some of the things that I was thinking about were challenged very directly. If this was an actual dialogue or debate, I probably would have been getting heated, as like on some of the pages that I read. So I think if that was the purpose, then wonderfully done. And if the purpose was to, just switch up bring on a perspective change, then I think that was done well. But yeah, I think the best way to fully understand like the relevance of everything I'm talking about would obviously be to like read it. I think if you're the kind of person who enjoys reading about psychological phenomena and the likes, I think this would be something right up your alley. But yeah, like in terms of like fun read, light read, not really. I do feel like some of what was said are just like different ways to echo certain things that one might already be familiar with. Personally, that's what I think. But it was a nice treat to just put on a different pair of glasses and look at the same thing again in a different way. So yeah, interesting book.